Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
Welcome on in. It's the Over the Line Extra podcast for the week after the Galway hurlers exited the championship and a couple of days before the footballers take on Derry in their All-Ireland semi-final. So first things first, Sean, commiserations. We thought you might be getting back to another All-Ireland final. It looked that way as we ticked towards injury time. And then just a couple of little things went pear-shaped, and suddenly within a blink of an eye, shades of a couple of years ago where it was pretty much the exact same scoreline and it went away from Galway. But I think there were mixed emotions from Galway, but I did make the point, the fact that Kilkenny hammered Clare on Saturday, I don't think the disappointment was that much amongst Galway people that might otherwise have been.
Well, I think we were all during our process here, haven't we been talking about the form lines, and it was so difficult to kind of read the form lines, and then suddenly on Saturday, you say Clare totally bombed against Kilkenny. Kilkenny went to a new level, seemed to be embracing the new game where they're going sharper, mixing it with the long game, and that result really did set the cat among the pigeons to a degree. But I think looking at it now, a few days out from Galway and Limerick in terms of where we're at, I think the one thing that hasn't been said a lot is there's no doubt that this Galway team is in transition. I think they used 25 players this year in the championship. 6 of them were debutants. Then throw in the likes of Jack Grealish, who got his first championship run of games. He made his debut back in 19. Tom Monaghan, who made his debut ironically in 17, but got his first starts in this year's championship. So there's a base there, and I think that what you're looking at now is that Galway found probably the composure of Limerick, the experience of Limerick, a little bit too much by the end of the game. The last 3 shots Limerick had were points. The last 3 shots Galway had, 2 of them went wide, 1 of them hit the upright, came back into play. Was it that Galway were under more pressure shooting than the Limerick guys? Limerick trusted their system. Some of their link-up play to set up the final few scores were very, very impressive. Their bench definitely was better than Galway's bench. I mean, David Reedy got 3 points. Cian Lynch and Peter Casey, ironically, got huge cheers when they came in. Didn't have that much of an impact, but still were enough to cause a kind of a fear factor, whatever. I think where Galway are at now, right now, did we find our level to a degree in 2022? The one disappointment, probably you could have added a Leinster title to it. But I think the performance last Sunday will give Henry Shefflin a degree of belief that with what he's working with now, you didn't have Garage McInerney either when you probably needed him in that game. The reason for that being that you brought Joseph Cooney back out of your attack to defence. So it was like a double whammy, the loss of Garage McInerney. But I think where Galway are right now, he looked at the club championship. He needs to find a few more players. Probably, particularly, it's ironic, probably at the start of the year, we would have felt maybe defensively, would Galway hold up? They have done. Both Jack Grealish and Darren Morrissey have bedded in. I think it's 1 goal conceded in 5 games. And it's probably now at the other end where we thought, the forward line might have been, we'll say, our key point for this year ahead. Probably was the one area that maybe didn't function as well. Now, having said that, I think Henry's probably going to have to look at how do you work the forwards as well. It's a criminal sin not to see Conor Whelan getting more possession. We have a problem as well on winning primary possession. Our stats for the championship in terms of winning long puck outs has been low. So they're the areas that you need to look at.
We were never going to replace Joe Canning in a year, were we? That's the thing.
Ever.
And even when you go back to 2017, when Galway were successful, you still needed perhaps Galway's and Ireland's greatest ever hurler to pull us out of the fire in a couple of big games with big scores at the end in matches that we probably should have been well clear 7 or 8 points. So that hasn't gone away in the context that we're still looking for a leader to come up that will pop over those scores that are needed. So we wait in time whether
we do, and I think
whether that's around the corner with the current minor or is it quicker than that?
Yeah, I think there's talent there, and I think it's a degree of sifting through it. The other thing is that this year you were beaten by the 2 teams that end up in the All-Ireland final. So you're probably still are within touch and distance, but I think I agree you need to find a few more players. Now I'm going to flip it all on its head. The other part of it, which as a Galway man begins to gall me in time, is that last Sunday we still had enough chances. We had 19 wides. We had probably 3 or 4 scores that came from terrible turnovers, right? Why couldn't we get those scores? Why couldn't we go against the head, beat the All-Ireland champions, get to an All-Ireland final, and maybe nick an All-Ireland kind of unexpectedly almost? So I think that's the next stage of development that's going to give us. There's no doubt that the more games you get, Galway played 8 championship games this year, you do find out a lot. But there is disappointment that you didn't win. But at the same time, I think there's a base there. So I don't know, how would you mark it at? Would you mark it as a 7 out of 10 years?
About that, no more.
Yeah,
I don't think we felt leaving Pearse Stadium, though, after beating Kilkenny on that controversial handshake day, that we were watching the All-Ireland champions that day.
No.
And yet, there's every chance it will turn out that way. Kilkenny and Cody, he's been in 17 finals out of his 22 years. Yeah. The only ones he's lost is Cork and Tip. Yeah, so why would he start losing to anybody other than the other big two now?
He's in a transition now, which the transition has seen him win 3 Leinster titles and reach 2 All-Ireland 19 and this year 2 All-Ireland finals. Not bad for a transition. The other thing I think, and I said this a few times at the start of the year, Ollie, that this is the first COVID-free, even though it's as bad as it ever was, but split championship season. The month we all assumed would catch, we'd say, the Limericks, the Kilkennys, even the Kerrys, and probably Kerry in football, would it be fair to say, are the most team that have looked like the month might have caught them to a degree. But now it looks like, particularly in Leinster, where you have 5 matches in 6 weeks, you nearly need to win your provincial championship to get the month, to get a bit of time and space firstly, and then start working on the issues that are there. Anonymous thing from me when a Kilkenny friend of mine told me that Cody felt that he saw more improvement in this team than he did in a lot of teams he's managed over that month. So while he was concentrating on the month, Galway, by losing the Leinster final, had the extra game against Cork. Again, as Michael Donoghue and the other managers have said often to us on the podcast, you need 3 or 4 days to come down from it. Then you build up, but you've only 6 or 7 days again. And we lost Garage McInerney within that as well. So I think now, looking at it now, the 4 games a month, or the 5 games in Leinster, the big thing for managers is just get to the knockout stages. But ideally, get to the final, win the final, and have the month off. It's just an observation. It's
the way it's fallen. Yeah. Anyway, the double dream has died for Galway. We'll survive for another year and hopefully be back on the horse for that in 2023. But the footballers are still alive after an epic victory over Armagh. We had Aaron Kernan on the programme here a couple of weeks ago. Looking forward to that. We did say it was a 50-50 game. Colm Keys came on and said, lads, this may well end up in a penalty shootout. And lo and behold, it ended up in a penalty shootout, albeit Galway butchered a 6-point lead late on to give them that lead. And now we look forward to Derry. And that brings back all sorts of happy memories for Galway football fans of a certain vintage who remember 98 and 2001, or might even remember a bit further back than that. So let's go to our Derry studios and join Michael McMullan of Gaelic Life, a man who's well used to seeing Galway men in the opposite corner, having played for Pats Maharad back in an era when Scan Cuncannon, the current Galway selector, was playing with that Jarlath's team with the Joyces and the Meehans and the Clartys. So good afternoon to you, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. You're welcome, lads. Unfortunately, we have a bad record against Galway between minor and I suppose schools football and obviously county, with the last 3 championship wins have all been Galway wins. So hoping for a change of fortunes this weekend. But it's going to be a good game, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at the Galway-Armagh match, and before that draw, we figured, okay, well, we knew that after winning Connacht, Galway were going to be on the opposite side to Dublin and Kerry, so we really weren't that bothered, and we were kind of figuring it's going to take 2 Ulster teams for Galway to get to an All-Ireland final. First up came Armagh. So let's talk about that first, Michael. What was your impression of that match and all that went on? That was kind of overshadowed by the melee, but in the end was a cracking game of football.
It was a brilliant game. I'm glad I stayed for the second day to watch it in the flesh. And I was like Colm Keys, and I tipped Galway to win it. I didn't go down the penalties route, but it was a fascinating game. Obviously, the incident at the end of extra time, it happened, it's gone. Thankfully, Sean Kelly's not suspended. He didn't do anything, but I don't think it should overshadow what was a brilliant game. Galway, that's what you get with Galway. Loads of entertainment, loads of attacking stuff. And, once they sort of ground Armagh down and got into the way of going, they were the better team. They were probably relieved enough to be 7-7 at half time. They got the rub of the green. Dylan McHugh got a questionable enough free to make it 7-6, and then it was 7-7. But and I suppose they were absolutely cruising, and then 2 or 3 Hail Mary balls into the Galway defence, and Armagh got something to hang on to. And when Jamar Hall put the point over the bar, I thought that Galway were gone, but they came back, and I suppose Killian McDade was that man. But it was brilliant stuff, and it's just a pity, lads, that we don't see more of that type of game, because it's exactly what the championship is crying out for.
So I suppose what we're drawing a line on now is, Michael, that recent Galway Derry meetings, there haven't been that many, but we did meet in the league, and those games in Owen Beg, that game in particular, came in the middle of a really shocking period of weather, Sean. You might remember the game in Pearse Stadium that was called off, and because of the heavy winds. And that day as well was another bizarre reason where Derry played against the wind in the first half and suddenly found themselves 14 points down at the break.
Yeah, and I suppose you're saying, what kind of store can you put on that, Michael? Can you put any store on that league meeting?
I wouldn't put a lot on it, to be honest. When you're talking about weather, that's what Owen Beg brings you every week. If you get a calm day at Owen Beg, it's a once in a blue moon. So, and Derry have always played against the breeze. They've sort of the opinion that you let the game settle down, but I think a lot was made of Owen Lynch's kickouts that day. I've said this since the game. Galway only actually won 2 of them directly, but the problem was for me that day was Derry had no energy coming out of defence. They couldn't break Galway down, and it was very, very difficult. And the second aspect of that game for me was Damien Comer's movement. He played it full forward. Brenton Rodgers picked him up, and he pulled him left and right, and it opened lots of space. And that, along with Derry not being able to break out from their own kickouts, left them in all sorts of trouble. And Galway were ruthless and efficient and an excellent footballing team, and punished them. And it was over after 20 minutes, to be fair about it. And and I think the week before at the Hyde, I think if Derry had got a win that day, they would have got promoted. You've obviously got the angle where Shane McGuigan was suspended going into that game. There was a lot of talk that week. But to answer your question, I wouldn't read too much into the result in terms of this weekend. If anything, I think it'll probably give Derry a bit of an advantage, because it focuses on that wee bit more. A wee bit like the Shamazel at the end of normal time. Like, if there's no Shamazel, Armagh may well have won the game in extra time. So sometimes things like that actually help you, because Galway come out with a bit between their teeth, and hopefully from a Derry point of view, that league game will give Derry something to sort of focus on, because I suppose every team always needs a cause of some sort, and maybe that'll be it.
Well, this is the thing, because we looked at Armagh, and a lot of people talk about their temperament, the fact that they've been involved in so many skirmishes, so many off the ball things in the last number of years. So we're the lazy bit of analysis here in Galway is that we're going to get more of the same from Derry. So is this like a northern thing? Like, have you got issues with this here in the west of Ireland, or what kind of a game can we expect?
Definitely not. I think I don't think there'll be much of that in it at all. I don't think you get away with it anymore, because if you get sucked into it, a referee can put your lights out in a few minutes, with decisions. So you just have to keep tuned in. This weekend's game, it's hard to know what way it's going to go, to be honest, because I suppose you've got Galway and you've Kerry and you've Dublin, and the 3 big hitters are in the last 4. And here's Derry and a sort of new kids in the block. First Ulster title since 1998 and all that that comes with it. But there's a severe level of hype here in Derry. That eventually they've got the supporters have got a team they can hang on to here at the moment. So I don't think Rory will change an awful lot from what has worked for him. It's a counter-attacking game. Men are back, but they've got an unbelievable level of energy to get forward. They're getting forward. And I suppose the Clare game sort of, it rubber stamped that. At stages, Derry are nearly a blanket attack, nearly as much as they are blanket defence. The Ulster final was different. You've 2 teams going with the same, the same style of football. It was going to be nothing else other than what it was, So, but if you look at the Tyrone game, the Clare game, and the Monaghan game, It was basically all out, off the shoulder, strong running, tight football. And, that's going to be very exciting from a Derry point of view. You're talking about Galway coming up against the Armagh side of things. Like for the first 2 minutes and 44 seconds of that game, Armagh had the sweeper in. Galway were playing past the parcel football all the way around the outside until I think it was a through ball. Galway got possession. And Galway sort of got themselves into that game, I felt, because they had the likes of Tierney and Rob Fernandy who were able to just find a pocket of space, tip over a couple of scores, and all of a sudden they were back in the game. So it's two very different teams for me going into the game this weekend. I'm not sure what you boys think, but I can't see Galway changing an awful lot either. So it's how it's going to go, I don't know.
So talk to us a little bit about Rory Gallagher, because he seems, dare I say it, a mini Jim McGuinness to a degree. But the one thing that strikes me, we say in the Ulster final, Brendan Rodgers almost went at Michael Murphy. It was like, this famous Kerry saying of, hammer the hammer or whatever. But even you've hit an intriguing point of all-out attack. It strikes me sometimes, this blanket defence, that some coaches have the numbers back, and at times some guys still don't know what their part is in the defence. Whereas Gallagher's defence, particularly Derry's defence this year, it seems to be very, very meticulously organised in terms of everyone knows their role. And as you say, the minute the defence is no longer needed, you go attacking as Rodgers does, just for an example.
Yeah, it definitely is, and before I go into it, if you go back to Donegal 2011 was all out defence. Donegal 2012 was all out counter-attack, so Derry is nearly sort of stuck between both those years. But if you look at Brendan Rodgers, as you mentioned, in the Ulster final, he went at Murphy and he attacked up and down Clonus all day. And on that occasion, Gareth McKinless, who did the similar role against Tyrone and Monaghan, he sat that bit tighter. So it's nearly as if it depends what you're up against. And to be honest with you, when you sit down to match up the players, those are the two boys I think will pick up Cian Walsh. So it's a case of does Rodgers follow Cian Walsh and McKinless goes to midfield, or vice versa. So that's the one where I can't really make up my mind what way it's going to go. And because Cian Walsh is so influential, albeit he hasn't scored from play as much as some of the other guys have done, you can't keep your eyes open. You can't keep your eyes off him. So the fact that he's there, that's going to ask questions of Derry's attacking game, because they can't afford to let Cian Walsh be free. So it depends whether it's McKinless or Rodgers. For my money, I think it might be Rodgers with McKinless and Glass at midfield. So that's the way Rory has been going about it. But it's, as you say, it's very, very meticulous. One of the biggest advantages he has had is Conor Grass being back from Australia. From the point of view is he's probably your all-out defensive midfielder. He's got the engine to track back. He's a good tackler. He's an excellent organiser. And I suppose in that Ulster final, I think he covered something like 18 kilometres, over the extra time and not normal time. So he's got the engine to get up and down the pitch. But that's where sort of Rory has, as you say, planned his defence. And then let Christian McCaig go back and be an all-out man-on-man marker. So I think everything sits fairly well, matchup-wise for Derry against Galway. But it's such a fine line. Galway they've got so many attacking options from play that Derry's defensive matchups this weekend are going to be so important. And it'll tell a lot about the game. But the most interesting one for me is who actually goes on Walsh. Is it McKinless or Rodgers?
There's an interesting piece in today's Independent where Neil Ewing, the Sligo footballer, talks about positions, and that at some point very soon the GA need to even look at how they still manage to line out players in a traditional 15 on a match programme, because it bears no reality to the way the game is played. And that the most important players are, as you described them, the transition players, the counter-attackers. And there's about 9 of them, he reckons, on every team. And if you count in the Armagh goalkeeper, that's 10. So in other words, that it's really all about the amount of mileage, as you say, that these guys can cover. And I add that in because there's every chance, Michael, that Saturday is going to be the hottest day of the year, the way the weather is going. And in Dublin, it's probably a degree or two warmer than it might be in Derry or certainly here in Galway. So fitness and being able to last the pace is huge. And maybe the bench could be the difference between these two teams this time because of the nature of what the conditions might be like. What are Derry like as regards the 20 or 21 players that they can extend their panel to?
Well, first of all, they're extremely fit. I don't think they have an issue fitness wise. If there's a fitter team in Ireland right now, as in 1 to 15, 1 to 17, I would like to see it. There probably would be question marks over their bench. When I saw the amount of high ball that Galway struggled with, there's a bit of me thinking, does Rory throw a curveball and start Emmett Bradley at full forward, who's a recognised midfielder? But the problem is, he has been the impact man that they've used. Padraig Cassidy, who played, I think, something like 13 out of Rory Gallagher's first 16 games for Derry, has played very little football this year. And when you talk about transitional players, he's right up there. So for the past few weeks, Rory has said they're keeping him. They didn't risk him against Clare. So if they'll maybe have more mileage in him this time. But they wouldn't have the same level of experience as, I suppose, the teams that are challenging for Sam, and that is a very valid point. Like in the Ulster final, Benny Hearn and Niall Toner came back on again, which is a bit of a rare setup, but it worked out in their favour because it was experience back on the pitch. But that would definitely be a question mark that a lot of Derry people will be asking. But and even in an interview during the week, Rory did say something like, you don't really need an awful lot of players. You don't need a massive squad. So he's very much about I suppose, the tried and tested 17, 18 players. And on a few occasions, even early on in the season, he's been on record as saying, look, I know 13 of my starting 15. So a county like Derry that struggled to have a settled team for so long now have one, but the flip side is their bench strong enough? And that would be definitely a question mark, especially if Padraig Cassidy, Hirashi McWilliams, who went off injured in that Galway League game, if those boys aren't ready, that will definitely rob them. But if they're available, that definitely helps things.
I suppose the one thing that we've really taken is the amount of goals that Derry are hitting, Michael, and I suppose that leads us to another point, the goalkeepers, because the goalkeepers are becoming huge players in the modern game, both hurling and football. The kickouts, as you mentioned, the high ball near the end, Valherma spray Galway did reap some dividends. So, Odrin Lynch, Conor Gleeson, they are now huge figures for Sunday, aren't they?
Well, they certainly are, and the spotlight's on them. Like Big Lynchy won't be happy with the 2 goals that he conceded, and there were, the second one in particular was a wee bit of freakish, but there seemed to be a lack of communication in there. Likewise, like the one that led to Armagh's 3rd goal, the ball seemed to hang in the air for a lifetime, and nobody seemed to go for it, and there was nearly a sense of panic. So I don't know. Is Conor Flaherty anyway close to being fit again? Does he come into the reckoning? I don't know. Derry won't change Lynch. Rory, even in interviews this week, he's backed him. He's mentioned his name as being a key player. He says it's good to have a 6'3" goalkeeper in there that's regular now. So, but probably between the Clare game and now, it's a case of getting tuned in again. But Lynch's kickouts are very good. I think they get too much. There's too much made of them. I think the goalkeeper sometimes gets through onto the bus a lot of time. And against Monaghan, he only won 54% of his own kickouts went to Derry men, but Derry were able to make enough out of it. And against Donegal, he only lost 5. And out of the 5 that he lost, only 1 the score came from it. The rest, Derry seemed to have a hunger that when Lynch gives the ball away, we get it back. So I don't think that's an issue. It's a case of just getting the organisation right for this weekend, which is a wee bit of a worry when I go back to that league game where Damien Comer was able to pull the Derry defence out. And when you have a defence where you're relying on a lot of matchups, where everybody's following everybody, it can leave space. And then, as you say, from the Galway point of view, like Gleeson hammered a lot of high ball down through the middle, and Big Ben Creeley was hoovering up a couple of them. And then when they started to go short, Galway were able to carry it, I suppose, through the two Corafin lads on the wing, McHugh and Malloy. So is that something that Joyce goes with? But I'd say even if Flaherty is back, which you boys will know more than me, I can't see him changing it. At the end of the day, you have to back your players and stick with them and just, do that wee bit of extra coaching. And sometimes things are too extreme. It's a wee bit like Derry's hammering by Galway in the league. It's not a reflection of where the teams are. Sometimes height thing, you can jump on it, and maybe the goalkeeper thing's a wee bit the same. I suppose you're always biased a wee bit when your own county, but I'd like to think that Owen will have a better day this weekend.
Yeah, I don't see Porrick Joyce changing Gleeson, but then again, we've no idea because there's no word coming out of the Galway camp this week.
Flaherty's back in, but
Flaherty's back in training. But they'll stick with Gleeson, I'm sure, and see what happens.
We won't tell you anyway, Michael.
I think it'll be difficult. I think it's going to be difficult when you weigh it all up to make any realistic prediction on what's going to happen, because it'll take on a life of its own, the game. But we're only throwing up what might be potential matchups. We're going to bring Johnny Higgins into the conversation now as well. He's waiting patiently in the wings. Because before we let you go, Michael, there was an amazing match between Galway and Derry at minor level. And the Galway minor lads are looking forward to an extraordinary meeting with Mayo for the third time in the All-Ireland final. Now, Galway led that game for so long and looked home and hosed and comfortable until Derry had a man sent off. And then Galway failed to deal with the extra man, which we also saw in minor hurling last weekend.
And here we say the high ball again.
And again, high ball and just complete chaos and anarchy ran through in the closing moments. And Galway were probably a kick of the ball away from maybe losing that game. If Derry got level into extra time, I think we were in bother. So just your thoughts, first of all, on the Galway minors and their chances of upsetting the apple cart beating Mayo.
Well, going into the game, I saw Galway as very much been an inconsistent team. I only saw them playing once against Dublin. And, the two midfielders, going through the middle, Lonergan and McGlinchey, they were extremely strong on the run, and they were very good in the ball. But they were by far the better team against Derry. Though, if it had been on 2, 3, 4 more minutes, I feel Derry would have won it because they had all the momentum. And I'm right in saying this is the third meeting of Galway and Mayo at minor level this year. I think it is, maybe between groups and same Connacht final or something. But I don't know an awful lot about Mayo, but they seem to be the form team in terms of scoring. But that win over Derry will have done Galway no harm at all. And going into the final, a wee bit like Derry, where the minors and seniors are going well in the same year, it brings a great level of excitement. I'm not sure how that one will go. I don't know probably enough about Mayo to know, but form book suggests Mayo they've won both games surprisingly. But welcome to minor level where form sometimes thrown out the window. We went into minor final in 2007 after beating Cork and Laois, and Galway beat us in the final. And we would have been favourites. So welcome to minor football, it's hard to know. And there's a bit of me thinking a lot of the time that it's better that the minor games go to Croke Park. But when you see what happened last weekend in a packed house, I'm sure there'll be a big, massive following from both sides this weekend tomorrow night in the Hyde, and that'll bring a bit of magic to it. But I don't know. I can't really call it. Probably whoever settles better, with Mayo probably being favourites with the 2 wins so far.
Listen, Mike, thanks a million for joining us. We look forward to your company in Croke Park on Saturday night. I'm sure you'll be up there keeping a close eye and writing for Gaelic Life as ever on the fortunes of Derry football. And who knows whether it will be Derry or Galway. There'll be an All-Ireland final to look forward to a couple of weeks after that.
Oh, lads, it has to be our time. We played these in 2001, and I said to my wife on the hill, I says, we need to book the Burlington in the morning before all the rooms are gone. And then Matthew Clancy hung the ball in the back of the net, and it was all gone. So it's our time, lads.
The rooms are even dearer now, Michael. Forget about it.
Michael McMullan chatting to us there from Gaelic Life in Derry. Well, from Derry, we go to Milltown, to Jonathan Higgins, who's going to talk to us a bit about that Galway-Mayo rivalry. Johnny, right on the border there. So, I mean, Michael's point is fair enough. Like, Mayo have been the best minor team in the country by far, definitely the best minor team in Connacht, hammered Galway the first time out, beat them by 6 points in the Connacht final, and now they have to turn around and there they are, beat them for a third time. Have Galway any chance in this minor final tomorrow night?
Oh, look, I think you'd always like to hope that there will be a bit of hope and a bit of chance, really, isn't it? It's a Galway team that has, I suppose, developed slowly but surely over the course of the campaign. And I suppose the bigger picture really is with the format of that is in this minor championship, you do have time to evolve a bit, and it does give, I suppose, aside from the silverware, an opportunity to push on and develop a bit more. And because particularly you look at that Galway team as well, there's a lot of young kids on there. We go back to the whole argument discussion about whether it should be under 17, under 18, etc. But it does give an opportunity for a lot of good young kids to come through and the chance to play inter-county football. You mentioned the Connacht final. While it might have been 6 points on the scoreboard, I think in reality it felt like more like the result from the round robin series. It was Mayo for large periods of that game. I thought they kind of almost bullied Galway out of it, and I'd be pull my hands up. I didn't see much chance of Galway going much further. I just thought it was a 6-day turnaround to Dublin. I just thought after such a heavy defeat like that they wouldn't be able to improve, and it would be too short of a turnaround to come on and evolve. What they have got a wonderful victory over Dublin. Played an exceptional 3/4 of the game against Derry, and at times were so impressive in that game. And you look over the road there, Costello from Damore absolutely flying it. Éanna Monaghan, of course, as well. But right through the team, they tore at Derry for large periods of that game. And probably the most impressive thing over that victory in the semi-final was the fact when they were down to 40 men for pretty much the first 10 minutes of the second half, and you thought, oh, this is going to be curtains, because Derry had got a goal just before half-time. You thought, okay, no, this is really going to struggle here. But they pushed on, and they absolutely tore into Derry, and it was a brilliant performance. Unfortunately, the thing that would worry you, and I suppose it's a little bit like the senior as well, I suppose the ass got stuck in the bog then at the end pretty much, and it was curtains. It was absolute curtains, and you're right, when you touched on, had Derry got an equaliser, had that game gone to extra time, I don't think we had a hope. But look, you go into this situation, the old rivalry, and hopefully that there will be a little bit of an opportunity for revenge over Mayo, and hopefully they can give a freshness, and hopefully there's the old saying, what, 1 out of 3, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of hope required. You mentioned Costello. Éanna Monaghan is obviously the star turn in that Galway forward line as well. And I'm sure he's one of the leading lights that Galway will be looking to for a big performance.
Hugely, yeah. Like exceptional game against Derry in the semi-final as well. Really led his team forward, and is a beautiful football. In fact, Galway throughout that Derry game, they got some, there was some nice scores throughout, and they showed they can, a bit of variation, nice bit of movement. A lot of kind of very slick hand passing through the lines. It was the hottest of hot potatoes being passed around at times. It was very impressive. Monaghan, you're right, is probably the shining light in the team vice captain there as well. Need a big performance out of him. I thought he was got a lot of treatment off the ball in McHale Park in the Connacht final that wasn't really picked up on at the time, and Mayo pretty much they identified him as I suppose a little bit like Shane Walsh with Armagh. He got a lot of heavy treatment off the ball, so he'll be a lot more wiser, you'd feel now, after getting that bit of a trial effort there as well. But yeah, you're going to need big performances all around. I think it's the sort of game you go into where you need absolutely everything to go to your way. But I think they very much have a big opportunity here at the same time, and what a game to look forward to. Yeah,
and I suppose, Sean, we've seen in minor how utterly unpredictable it can become. I mean, that Offaly thing was just sickening at the end.
And even, Tip looks so good against Galway in that semi-final, particularly their forward line, and yet for 59 minutes of the 60, Offaly seem to have done enough, hinged on a big decision as well, of course. But Jonathan and Michael have alluded to, I think we have to bear in mind that minor, the change from under 18 back to under 17 means that you now have 16s and 17s playing. And I think that's maybe where a degree of the inconsistency is coming. I chatted to a Mayo friend yesterday who is absolutely, he can see this written in the sand. Like he said, we're playing a team that's been beaten 3 times in the championship, that we beat twice, and you're going to probably beat us in the final. So there's a little few inconsistencies around it, but I think for the players that are involved in the Hyde Park tomorrow and for their families, this is a huge occasion, and I think it's a driving force. I myself have mixed ideas as well about why it's not in Croke Park. I think given the amount of players that don't make it from minor on in both codes, this could be their biggest day. And I think that particularly last Sunday, Galway Limerick, there was no curtain raiser game. I know there is for Galway Derry, there's the Tailteann Cup, but I think that the minor, maybe you could look at putting it back in on the biggest day, particularly where there isn't a curtain raiser, because I think there will be issues with getting crowds in later on to just single games. But anyway, we wish Galway the best of luck.
Yeah, it'll take on a life of its own, that fixture tomorrow. Johnny will be down there, and so too, of course, Darren and Kevin on commentary duty as well. Jonathan will also be joining us in Croke Park on Saturday night, where he'll be heading down, whatever happens, and hoping to get some reaction from the Galway camp as regards a potential All-Ireland final. But that's where we leave it for this Over the Line podcast for now. We'll be back next week, all things being equal, if we have an All-Ireland final to look forward to.
Wouldn't be bad.
Otherwise, we might be taking a well-earned break for a week as we get ready for the club championship, which mightn't be that far away as well. Johnny, thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks,
guys. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, so that's the next thing now. The hurlers already are back in their club, Sean. They're getting ready for club championship action. Any word on when that's going to be?
Yeah, it starts the week before the races. A lot of anxious club managers at the minute who still have a lot of players away, and you cannot blame players. The last 2 years with COVID, they didn't get a chance to get away. So there's a chance that the first round, even second round, you could have some teams without players or whatever. There was even, going into last weekend, would Galway have beaten Limerick? Would they have got to an All-Ireland final? Would that have stretched it out a little bit? But it seems to be all systems go for the week before the race.
Well, that's it. There's been a mass exodus of Galway GA club players and indeed one or two county lads to New York and to Boston and Chicago in the last number of weeks. They can't be summoned back because you can't play for 30 days after you sign off to go until you come back. But I'd say there'll be a lot of flights being organised pretty quickly for very early in August.
And we're also going to see the real close or this split season in operation again this season, and the club championship will come week on week. I mean, it's every second week, hurling football every second week, but you pick up an injury in either inter-county now or senior, you're going to miss a few games. So it's full on when it starts.
No doubt about it. And this podcast will be keeping full on as well as we make that change from county to club in the couple of weeks that lay ahead of us as well. But for now, all we could do is wish the Galway teams the very best of luck in their minor and senior championship games. From myself and Sean, thank you for watching.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.